Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Welcome to the Movers Mindset Podcast, where I talk with movement enthusiasts to learn who they are, what they do, and why they do it. My guest today is Nima King. Welcome, Nima. How are you?
Hi, Craig. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on your show. Cheers, man.
My pleasure. Thank you for doing the hard work of reaching out to me out of the blue. Sometimes I have guests that I hunt down, sometimes for many years. And sometimes I have this delightful, lucky situation where really awesome topics and people pop in my inbox. So thank you so much for sending me an email, that had some ideas for what we could talk about. I was like, yes, all of these, let's talk for 9 hours. We did a pre-call. And so people who listen a lot know that I've spent a great deal of time studying Aikido, which is a Japanese art. And today we're going to be talking a little bit, about Wing Chun, which is I would say a traditional Chinese martial art.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. And I want to first ask, I watched some videos of you where you were kind of alluding a little bit about how in the beginning, your teacher was, trying to instruct you basically how to turn your mind off and stop asking questions and stop doing like the Western, seek the goal, seek the target, figure it out, and then have a path.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask initially, can you recall what it was like when you first understood what your Sifu was getting at when he was trying to get you to turn off your mind and instead, I don't even want to say do the other thing because it's really more like be the other thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it is that. It is a sense of being rather than thinking. And especially from my background, I started Wing Chun when I was 14 years old in Sydney, Australia. And when I was a teenager, I was a bouncer. That's what I did for work. And that type of Wing Chun we did was in the same lineage. So I was training with who I started to learn with in Hong Kong. His name is Master Choi. I was learning with one of Master Choi's students, Jim Fung. And he had thousands of students in Australia, all over Australia. So that was more like a real, what we call, let's say, external against this attack, you do this technique. It was sort of like that. We did a lot of sparring and things like that, which was good for me at the time. So anyway, fast forward 6 years, I was already a teacher by then for Jim Fung School. I meet Master Choi and man, I tell you, I was just blown away. It was like what you see in the old Kung Fu movies. At the time, it was maybe 70 years old. Yeah, I guess it was around 70, maybe 69, 70 years old. I'm skinny. He would be 54 kilograms. And at the time, I would have been 85 kilograms. And in the seminar, he's asked for someone a volunteer to come and demonstrate on. Of course, I put my hand up.
Fresh meat, right?
Exactly. And long story short, he couldn't speak English. So through the translation, the translator was like, he's asking you to stop, put your forearm underneath his forearm and stop him from moving his arm down. And while he was describing in Cantonese what he's doing, he moved his arm down and it just felt like someone threw a bag of cement on my arm and I dropped straight down. And I said, okay, because I wasn't holding it as hard as I could. Because, I thought, okay, he's the master, he's an old man, there's 50 people watching. So then when I felt that, I said, okay, do it again. So I held really hard up. I changed my stance. I held really strong. And he sort of looked me up and down. He saw that I'm trying to sort of stop him. And he had a little smirk. And this time he went a little bit faster. And he nearly hit me to the ground. And right then and there, I was like, I've got to follow this guy. So I sort of dropped everything. And within a year, I was in Hong Kong. That was 2005. And this is sort of a long answer for your question. But coming here, my expectation was, okay, we're going to come here and this is a real deal. We're going to be sparring like the old Kung Fu movies on rooftops and all of this. And I came in and I looked around. And first of all, we were training in his living room. It was in his flat in Hong Kong, very small space. He had set up some mirrors and a wooden dummy, but I think it would fit maximum 10 people in his living room, very small space. And there was a few people there and they were just standing around. They were just standing. There was no like sparring going on. So I looked around, okay, I'm going to stand and start doing the forms. And then hours go by and I'm like, okay, there's no structure.
We're still standing.
We're still standing. And so we're standing and we were doing the forms. So Wing Chun has these empty hand forms, which is like the katas in karate and things like that. And then next day, same thing. Next week, same thing. And then I sort of realized, okay, this is not what I was expecting. This is going to be different. It's a completely different type of training.
Mm.
And I tell you, Greg, this was the hardest thing at that time that I had to go through, both physically and mentally, because it's just so difficult. Like standing still and not moving. It's just so difficult. All these inner demons start to come up. You start thinking, and,
there's nowhere to hide when you just stand with yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we're standing on hard floors. Their feet are hurting. Their knees are hurting. So, but it wasn't like a one-off thing where it was like this one moment where suddenly all my thoughts dropped and then I was in this sort of state of bliss or something. It didn't happen like that for me. It was a gradual thing. So slowly, I would be able to, with his guidance. So he was very hands-on as well. So he would give a lot of tactile cues, as you would have seen in some of the videos. He's sort of manipulating our spine and doing these little nuances and changes in our posture and in our stance, and sort of spoon feeding the state to us, like when the body, when different tension points will start to release, your whole body starts to change and adapt to that. And you think, hold on, that's a different feeling. And so this is why I always say it's like with what we do, it's like trying to subtract, because we got so much tension. We've got so much thinking. And especially, like you said, with this kind of Western mindset where we want to know what the goal is. And I would ask so many questions and to conceptualize.
Right. Give me the curriculum and the outline up front.
Exactly. Right? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'll put in all the hours and I'll do it. In fact, one time he actually banned me from asking questions. He said, "You're not allowed to ask any questions anymore." And for about for the first couple of days, I was like, honestly, like half an hour, and I'd be like, and then I'll stop myself and I'm like, oh yeah, he said no questions. And then after a couple of days, I started asking, he started answering again. But so the feeling was very gradual, but it was just that. It was that slowly, there was less thinking about what I need to do, less conceptualization, less of an intellectual understanding, trying really hard to understand intellectually what he's saying and try to copy that. And through letting all that go, like you said, I started to feel, I started to be in a more mindful, sort of a calm yet very alert state of mind. And I would start to feel just difference in the body. Like I would have a different control in my body. One thing I do, for example, in seminars, I hold my arm out, and obviously people can't see me holding my arm out, but I'm holding my hand up as if I'm holding my arm out in front of my body, as if I'm holding a tray or a cup on my palm facing up. And of course, in this position, the bicep has to contract, right? And the bicep tendon and all that. And I ask everyone to hold their hand up. And I say, okay, everyone, now try to relax and release your bicep and the bicep tendon. So it's a tangible release. Everyone stands there and people start looking around and start laughing. No one can do it. And I say, okay, so come up, touch my bicep or touch my bicep tendon. And then I'm able to release it. And people are like, wow. And okay, so what good is that? Okay, now try to stop me from doing like a bicep curl to test the power of the elbow joint. So if I'm doing it normally with tension, it's like this. And then as I relax it, it becomes very effortless, but very, very difficult to stop. And that's sort of my in, usually beginning of every seminar. That's my in to say, okay, so when I'm talking about mindfulness, when I'm talking about relaxation and being able to use the mind to tap into the body, I'm talking about it in a very tangible sense. It's not an esoteric, like, let's tap into the heavens or anything like that. Of course, there is energy and we can go down that path, because I know you've done Aikido and you know about Ki and as people call it Chi. But I'm just talking about the pure biomechanical control, the musculoskeletal control. And I believe we're tapping into the fascia, that type of control that we can have with the power of our intention.
It's a whole world. Like there's a whole piece of that. When I started Aikido in 1998, I think it was, I was 27 or 28 years old. I always tell people I was just old enough to be ready for the teaching. So in the story that you're describing, there's also this component of like, you couldn't have forced that. You had to like just be in Australia and then just fall in with the thing that resonated with who you were at the time. And then that got you the opportunity to bump into so like that whole journey is this whole overarching thing. So yeah, when I ask you for the moment where it changed, it's like, well, no, Craig, it doesn't work that way. So I always say I was just old enough to be ready for it, but I was just young enough to be able to survive getting beat 5 days a week, and like come back to class over and over and heal up. And I think that's a key part about finding. So for people who are like, I never really did martial arts, not sure I want to doing this stuff. It's like, well, maybe you start with Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
Like here in the States, it's becoming easier to find a Tai Chi instructor. Or maybe you start with yoga. You might have to fish around to make sure you find the right yoga class that's going to lead you in the right direction. Like some of them might not ever get you that on-ramp.
Yeah.
But I think there's that really interesting piece about when the student is ready, the master appears, not because the master wasn't there before, but, just because the master was invisible and the student couldn't see them.
Yeah.
And I love that you pointed to that, how you're pointed to your arc rather than to a particular moment where like the teacher handed you a gift or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was struck, see what I did there? I was struck by the relaxation part is super important. My teacher used to say, not that he's died, but I've heard him say it a lot in the past. I haven't heard it super recently, but he would say things like, relax beyond any indication, every injury you've ever received. And these little phrases, I'm sure there are ones from your art.
Mm-hmm.
These phrases that you hear over and over, they kind of make you do the RCA dog, like, tip your head, like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. And it took me a while to realize that part of what I was learning was a new physical language, new to me, a new physical language. And like when my teacher would say, yeah, just shut up, like come to class, train, go home, don't think about it, empty your cup, come back, just like he was trying to get me to learn this new language, which in Aikido has Japanese words and particular forms, but you're describing a parallel thing. There's this physical language that they try to teach us so that you can shut up, so that they can communicate with you to show you this other thing that's not behind the curtain, but that's further on. And I think it's really magical when you find, in any context, not just martial arts, when you find someone who can communicate that way with you.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, have you had moments maybe where you found outside of Wing Chun, where you've found another, I don't want to say teacher, but somebody else who's communicated like that, who's like showed you something that made you look at things in a different way? Or I'm just looking for parallels to that journey.
Yeah. Not really, to be honest. Actually, with Master Choi, he sort of became the mentor. And he sort of was also a father figure to me, So everything he did, I sort of idolized him. And I was training 6 hours a day. I trained with him for about just over 9 years. He passed away in 2014. And we were doing 6 hours a day. So well over 10,000 hours with him. And it was very hands-on. But, I would watch him, even the way he ate. I would look, how's he eating? The way he would take care of his plants, the way he would be watering the plants. I was like, wow, he's so, So I really idolized him. So pretty much, even after he passed away, I started to not try to become like him, because you can't become like anyone. You can only take lessons and be who you are. But the lessons that he had left behind through the teachings, I began to sort of embody them. And then I became the vessel now to start to teach people. So it was really great when he was around, because I would be training with him 6 hours, and when we opened our school here in Hong Kong in 2008, I would be teaching for about 8 hours a day. Yeah, I know, that's 14 hours, There wasn't much sleeping going on. But so it was great, because students maybe would ask something and I'll be like, well, look, to be very honest, that level, I'm not sure. I'll let you know tomorrow. And I'd go there that night and I'll ask him, he'll tell me. So I was sort of the middleman between the receiver and the giver.
It was way to learn.
It was
right?
so good, man. It was so good.
Forces you to be able to teach. Like if you can't teach it, you don't even have any idea what it is yet.
Exactly. But, going through, so to answer your question, there wasn't one sort of particular person that in person, like Master Choi, I learned that from. However, going through the transformation, I can use that word, certainly, the transformation. I was an angry kid, man. I was such an angry kid. I was just lost. And I came from a huge background of trauma and, a crazy violent upbringing. So I just had a lot of fear, a lot of anger and all that kind of stuff. So this art really did, and Master Choi's teaching really did transform me. So going through that transformation and finding those little or tasting those little hidden lessons in the teaching. And by the teaching, I mean, of course, it was through his guidance, but it was my own standing there and going through the heart, the demons in the mind and the pain, etc., physical pain, getting through all that, overcoming all that, going through a transformation process then enabled me to, when I meditate a lot as well, quite spiritual in that sense. So picking up a spiritual book or doing here, I do the Vipassana meditation. So you do a 10-day course. So going there, and I just became a lot more open to pick up lessons and little golden nuggets from a book or from someone at the meditation course. Whereas before that, I was quite closed, not because I was just a young guy and thought I knew it all, but because I was very closed off, and because that was my protective mechanism, my self-protection mechanism from all the fear and all that kind of stuff. So this art did open me up, and his way opened me up to the other teacher's way from books and other stuff. So
yeah, there's that upward virtuous cycle, right? Like the first time you have an aha moment of any type, then now you're different. Like you've now moved up a step on that spiral staircase, hopefully up, maybe sometimes it's sideways.
Yeah.
that winds up feeding every time you experience something, it changes the way you look at things. And I don't think that when I started martial arts, because I didn't do any I shouldn't say that. I did martial arts when I was in college for like 3 months. I studied Taekwondo, and I don't want to, off the top of my head, I can't remember the instructor's name, but it was the only time in my life I was ever in shape. 3 semesters of Taekwondo. But other than that, I had never done any martial arts. So this falling into Aikido wound up with like this it was like a tap on the wine glass. And then you go to the next thing, and then something else. And then suddenly I'd notice a behavior of mine that I had been doing for years, or I'd see something else out in the world. And, you're right to point to that. Maybe if there's something we encourage people to cultivate, it's to figure out like, for the people listening, what's your next question, or what's your next, I make the sound, what's your next, like if you can get a student to go, you can move to the next student, like, well, come back here tomorrow, and that leads to that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and with Master Choi, there was a lot of moments of, it was nearly every night, man, because this guy would be like, it was like he was doing magic.
Yeah.
That just like, how is he doing that? And he wouldn't just say, just stand there and train. He really wanted to explain it with science, and if he didn't know, or when he didn't know how he's doing something, he would say, I don't know. I can just do it. I know if I intend like this, I can do it. But exactly how it's happening, I don't really know. We asked him about, is the circulation of energy in Wing Chun, in what he did, is it similar to Tai Chi? He said, actually, it's not. He said, actually, we don't work with the Dantian. And he said, it would be actually more similar to yoga in raising the Kundalini energy, because we work really a lot with the spine. And it was very interesting because he was teaching full time for 60-something years, 63 years before he passed away. So of course, all listeners, whether they do martial arts or not, everybody knows Bruce Lee. My teacher started with Bruce Lee's teacher, Yip Man, before Bruce Lee started. So my teacher was a third student of Yip Man in 1951. Because he came from Guangzhou, which is one of the cities in China. Yip Man, Bruce Lee's teacher, came from Foshan. They sort of escaped. They came to Hong Kong during the Cultural Revolution. And because both of them didn't have family here, they ended up living together. So for 5 years, they were living together. He was living with Yip Man. And after that 5 years is when Bruce joined. Bruce was just a young teenager. That's when he joined. So it's that old school. He was that old school. Anyway, so in this whole time that he was teaching, only in the last 7 years, so 2 years into when I was training with him, he realized the importance of the spine and what he would call rising energy up the spine from the tailbone all the way up, decompressing the spine. And that became, because he got a very good level of, let's call it, quote unquote, internal skills in the Wing Chun. And his peers weren't getting that. There was a lot of great martial artists, great fighters. Back in the day, there was in Hong Kong, the old Kung Fu movies where you see people come into a school, another martial arts school comes in and they say, okay, I'm so-and-so, I challenge you. and there's a one-on-one fight. That was a thing in Hong Kong, and it was legal. They called it rooftop. They called it gong sao, which means talking with your hands. And that would happen on the rooftop, so we call it rooftop fights. And only in the 80s, when the triads got involved and people started to get really badly hurt, is when it became illegal. But if you can imagine, you're coming to a Kung Fu school, you're practicing, and you know at any point, either you're going to be sent to do a challenge someone, or you're going to have to answer a challenge. You're not going to be standing there thinking, how do I relax? How do I use my mind? You're going to be thinking about what techniques, how to punch harder,
right?
Which is what was going on. But for him, he was a secretary and that's how he met his teacher, Yip Man. He was just sitting there watching him teach, and he was fascinated, and that's how he joined. But he said, I would finish in a couple of hours, I would finish all my work for the week. So I had nothing to do. So once I started training, I would just always be up on the rooftop training 9 hours a day. And I was so fascinated that this little guy, Yip Man, which would have been 5'4" or something, like very small, how he was throwing around these much younger, much larger students. And he kept saying, you don't have to use muscular force and things like that. And he said, I asked Yip Man, and Yip Man said, okay, so you got to stand there and move very slowly and try to cultivate an idea. It's all about the mind, not using muscular force. And he said, okay, then I believed him. So I ventured off in a journey. I would go up on the rooftop. It was completely dark, and I would just move very, very slowly and try to figure out, okay, how do I cultivate this? And how do I stand with less effort? How do I move with less brute force? And within a couple of years, he started to develop this thing, and he didn't even know he had something special that the others didn't. It was only until his training partners that were the first two seniors before him, they were ragdolling him and throwing him around.
Right.
Then after like a short while, a year or two, they couldn't do that anymore. And they were like, what are you doing? Are you sort of doing weights? How come you're very strong? And then he realized he had something special that others weren't feeling. So what I'm getting at is that's why till the last day that he passed away, he wasn't very happy with himself as a teacher, because it's like, in 60 years, I wasn't able to reproduce someone to my level. And as I'm saying, it's only the last 7 years that he found out about the importance of what he would have been doing for decades, but he didn't know, which is the decompression of the spine, because his spine was already open enough. And you know what I mean? Sort of.
Yeah, you can't see it's like the old thing about two fish. Like, how's the water today? What's water? Like once you internalize one thing, once you really learned and experienced something, it's difficult to remember, well, how did that feel the first time I did that? Or
exactly.
How did that feel the first time that I experienced that?
Yes. There's a famous video on YouTube on our channel from one of his second DVD, where he's talking about what I just said about his journey. He said, look, I tried my best. I was teaching people. I tried, there was 3 different groups in the 6 decades. First, I tried to teach just the fighting. Then I taught more tactile. And then the last 10 years, I was like, okay, I'm just going to try my best to teach the internal aspect. Even if I don't get any students returning, that's just what I'm going to teach. And I was lucky that that's exactly the time that I ended up coming to Hong Kong. So I was one of the lucky ones to be going through that teaching. But you can see at the end of that clip, he says, I don't know how much, and this was probably about 2 years before he passed away, maybe 3 years. He said, I don't know how much time I have left, but my last wish is those handful of my students that are able to activate this state. He called it the Lim Tao state. Lim Tao just means idea, the power of the mind. This Lim Tao state, those students that can activate the Lim Tao state to a small degree, that they find a faster way, because I'm sure there must have been a faster way in the past and I just couldn't figure it out. So I hope so this has been my journey. This has been that's why I went down the path of studying fascia, anatomy, lots of meditation, lots of stuff. And I think 10 years, it's been 11 years now since he's passed, we're having a lot more success. Like, we're able to get students that are, let's say, training in 3 or 4 years as good as previously, to the level that it would take other students 10 years, 15 years to get to. So yeah, I'm hoping if he's listening, he would be proud of how we've tried our best to sort of continue his legacy, stand on his shoulders and continue his legacy like that.
Thank you for sharing all that. Because it's important for people to hear. You go somewhere for an hour and a half and maybe you get wowed but you really don't understand. Yeah, that person spent 50 years to, there's a 50-year journey for that teacher that led to today where I happen to be here for an hour. And it takes a long time before you look back and go, oh, wow, there was a 35-year journey or whatever before the first day that I showed up. And it's all this giant
Mm,
mixture.
mm.
But I wanted to say, you mentioned Ip Man and the history, and there's a great blog post that I found. I'll link to it in the show notes. A great blog post I found, which sort of unpacks a little bit of that lineage to give people a feeling for like who were these people that you're talking about and like what is the history. Because yes, you can watch the Ip Man films; they're awesome films. But I always question, like, yeah, this isn't really a documentary. Like, this is
Not at all.
fictionalized. Not,
Not at
yeah,
all. Yip Man did not
but
fight the general of the Japanese army, nor did he
yeah,
fight
no,
Mike Tyson.
you're right. But it's interesting to see. But these were based. These were real people, and there are actually real stories to all of those people's lives. Of course,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
so many things I can pull on here. What were you thinking? I'm going to say that you're in a transition currently. Maybe it's a multi-year journey, but you're currently in a transition where I'm kind of gathering your students are sort of pressing you more to like, this is great. Now more people need to hear about it. And that's sort of, I think, what led to your students telling you to email me.
Yes.
I don't know if my 3 listeners are going to spread it very far, but do you feel like I'm imagining this upward curving spiral. You're back to this place where, oh, now you need to change who you are maybe a little bit, or you need to find a way to be more, I don't know, overt or outgoing with what you're sharing. Like, I'm just wondering what it feels like these days as you're trying to maybe navigate that transition.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of weight on my shoulders when he passed away. Well, first of all, I had to deal with the passing because, as I said, he was like the father figure and all of that, and my teacher. And I was very
Right.
attached to his teaching. If I would feel something special in my body, I would think, okay, I've got to go tomorrow, and I hope he can see it, and I want him to verify what my feeling is. So I had this sort of
Mm.
attachment, which was great that when he was around, but it wasn't healthy for my own training. I needed to take control, which happened when he passed away. But I had this weight of my shoulders in those early days of, okay, there is in this lineage, because even though he was who he was, having lived with Yip Man and being one of the, at the time when he was alive, he was the most senior student of Yip Man. But he was never into marketing himself at all. So, in fact, when we came, he had closed his door so he wouldn't take any new students for the last 9 years. So there wasn't many students that were all in terms of dedicating their lives to continue this legacy. So that I felt fell on my shoulders. And I already had a school. And now I can say, so to ask you a question about what I'm feeling now that pressure has turned into a drive. It was always a drive, but there's less sort of pressure of, okay, where do I start? Where do I go? What do I do? Because we have a great team. Just before COVID, this was just lucky. Just before COVID, Hong Kong went through these protests for about 6 months. So where I was living and where our school is right in the central CBD of Hong Kong. So, a few times I'd had to walk through tear gas and stuff like that just to get home. It was never that violent, but it was just, there was turmoil on the street. So it means not good for business. Students wouldn't be coming to class. You know what I mean? So, but it was lucky that 6 months before the protest started, I launched an online school. And that was a good move. That was a very lucky move. Some people say it was fate because that is what got us through the period of COVID, where we literally had to, for 3 years in Hong Kong, gyms, which we fall under the umbrella of gyms, martial arts schools, we were closed for more than half of that time. So for a year and a half, we were closed. We would open for a while, and then 3 months later, okay, the next wave, we got to close up again. And, the teachers at the time, they're all my great friends, my best friends, and we have kids and stuff. You can't just fire people and say, so you have to keep paying them. So lucky that, and the whole world was at home, and that was a good boost for the online school. So that really sort of, from people not knowing it about Choi Shun Tin's unique method of Wing Chun, because it is very unique. Like if you go to another Wing Chun school, not that it's better or worse, it's just very different. They don't usually focus on this internal aspect that to the level, at least to the extent that Choi Shun Tin did. So from people not knowing about him and about his teaching, it suddenly went to hundreds, and then now thousands of people know about it. So now I've come up with an instructor pathway, and there is now a clear plan of how to, as time goes, I'm going to be doing this forever and for as long as I can. Really, because
I'm gathering that, right?
yeah, because he was doing that literally until the day he was put on his deathbed, and 3 days later he died in the hospital. Literally until the day before, I mean, he could hardly walk, but he would come up because after the first few years of training with him, from his house, they rented a place in the same building. So he was living in the 4th floor. They rented the 10th floor so that his wife could have some privacy after decades of him teaching there. But he would come up to the last day and he could barely walk, but he would sit down and he would verbally teach. That's all he had. So I think I would be the same. But the plan is that there's this sort of infrastructure, let's say now in place, at least in my mind, but it is manifesting so that there is the hope. So my plan is to do the best I can to make his wish come true, which is continue to find better ways to explain it, find faster ways to teach it, but to spread it and let it put in the infrastructure so that it continues to spread, so that it doesn't die with him or with this generation, that it continues. And I think with the online school and with the now instructor pathway, the foundation has been laid for that. So how do I feel about it? I feel like there's a lot of work to do, but I feel the pressure is changed now to like, okay, we know what we've got to do. It's like a marathon. At least I see that there is a marathon. I've got to run to the end. There is a goal. Whereas before, the goal was sort of, I didn't know the path to the goal, but I knew I had to do it. So yeah.
It's interesting. I was going to say dancing, but it's not quite right. We've been revolving around this idea of, should it be goal-oriented or should it just be experiential? And in the beginning, like you and I literally, we bring the wrong kind of goal-oriented mindset to the practice. And teachers are like, no, shut up, stop asking questions. Just do the thing, come back. And then after you get the lessons, then you realize, the old metaphor about you're actually following somebody through the woods, your teacher. And they're kind of looking back, going like making gestures like, there's a shortcut. Go, don't go this way, go that way.
Go
and
left.
Like you get the privilege of going the shorter path or the easier path or the more direct path. And you realize that, okay, then one day you get to where they were standing when they said go left. And it didn't take you as long. But when you get there, you're like, yeah, but there's actual work I have to do here, which is what they were thinking when they stood there. Now I have to apply some analytics or some nerd computer technology. Like, I'm always fascinated how there are these cycles of, as much as I do love to rag on computers and technology and social media platforms and all these things, it's like, yeah, they're tools. And when I figure out, when I figure out how to use those tools correctly, they're power tools.
Yes.
When I try to build something, I have a great screwdriver, let's use it, I invariably make things worse. It's much better to be like, what should I be doing? What tool would be the right tool for that? So I love how we're actually I'm making a circling gesture with my hand. We're making these circles around different ways to grow and then different ways to return and use a tool that we had to learn to abandon. Now we're picking that tool back up again in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And also the lessons that we get. I mean, the lessons that I picked up from the practice, which is not trying too hard. And this is something that I'm still, after 27 years of doing this, man, I'm still working on. Because my attitude towards life is like, if you want something done right, do it yourself and do it, go all in. And sort of
You're like my evil twin separated at birth.
Sort of this like this sort of David Goggins mentality of like, really like, okay, you're injured, but you still go. And I've always been like that. But now, for me, I mean, what David Goggins do, I'm a fan of him, and he's great. He's very inspirational, and he inspires a lot of people. So, but for me, really, this to find out, because you can achieve stuff, but with less effort, or you can allow things to happen. And there is a sense of letting go that needs to happen, which is really, really, really scary, to let go of control. Not that I can do it perfectly, but this is my practice now in my daily life. But I'm a parent as well. I've got 2 kids. My son's 11, my daughter's 8, so they're still relatively young. I'm holding my breath for the teenage years, but
that's a whole nother show.
That's a whole other show, exactly. But with it just, I mean, to bring the lessons of what I practice in my art to parenting, to be able to let go. And you can't fully let go. I'm not one of those parents that, okay, at 7 years old, I'm going to give them a smartphone and say, here, have free reign. But at the same time, I can't say zero screen time ever, So I'm bringing in the lessons that I have from my practice to try to apply them to life as well. And I think, yes, now in regards to your question of how do I feel, what I want to do, yes, there is a goal, but I have to constantly remind myself not to burn myself out by going all in, and that it is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and to be wise about how I use my resources, which is the number one resource is my own energy, mental and physical energy. So, yeah.
A lot of wisdom in there, Nima. I like to remind myself I need to let go of the illusion of control.
Yes.
Because I keep getting burned like I'm in control. Oh, no, I'm not. Yes. So just let go of that illusion, Craig.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think I would just say, and of course, the final question, 3 words to describe your practice.
So, as I've been saying, I think the 3 words would be art of subtraction. I would say that that'll be it. So this is, as I said, something that I'm still basically letting go, understanding real meaning of letting go, which I think letting go isn't being lazy, isn't not caring, not giving a shit. Letting go is a very powerful thing. Being vulnerability, especially as men, this is a massive thing. I think that for myself, I was like, I go to the gym, get bigger, get some tattoos, and this is me when I was younger, someone looks at me, stare at them back, and that's what attracted me to Master Choi when I first met him, that he was just so humble. He didn't have to, if you bow to him, he would bow lower. He would always have a smile on his face. He would shake your hands by embracing your hand with both of his hands and things like that. And I was like, hey, hold on, that's a real man. That's, for me, that's powerful, not someone that's using aggression or things like that. So this sense of letting go, this sense of vulnerability and this subtraction rather than always wanting more and always trying really hard to do more. I think that's what this art is about.
Terrific. As I say all the time, Nima, it was a pleasure, first of all, to meet you, get a chance to chat. This was great. I have this sneaking suspicion this might not be the last visit you have to the podcast. I can see doing more of these. So thank you so much for taking the time. We're on opposite sides of the world. As much as I sometimes hate technology, the internet makes this possible. So thanks for dropping by.
And thank you so much, Greg. Thank you for what you do. I think it's really important, as I told you in our first chat as well, it's really important to have people like yourself doing what you do. I think it's, even if it is, to make the joke that you did, only 3 listeners, you're doing really great work. So thank you. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for having me on.